Madam Superintendent.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank all the members of our leadership team, my leadership team who are here this evening. I appreciate your efforts and all the work that went into building this budget. So we wanted to start by zooming out, and the theme of my overview is Zoom. And a few months ago, the leadership team will recall we had fun in this very room figuring out our piece of the puzzle and where each of us fit in the bigger perspective, in the bigger picture. So I do have a gift for you all this evening, a copy, your very own copy of Zoom. I'm not going to read it, Mr. Mayor, because it has no words. It is a wordless book, and
You're doing your budget, you know.
I know. This is the entree, as you will. You are meant to open the book and cut the pages out, mix them up. This is an activity that I do with my 5-year-old granddaughter, as well as my leadership team. So it spans all groups, and everyone enjoy it just as well. The point of this is to zoom out or zoom in based on your perspective. And we used it in our leadership team trying to determine where our piece, where our school, where our site fit in the bigger picture. It's very interesting to see how it unfolds. So the whole concept of Zoom is around the word perspective. And so we use that as the key to building our budget, the perspective. On a macro level, we know that we're a piece of the city budget, the city of Marlborough. However, when we listen to our site managers and our principals, they advocated very strongly on a micro level for what they felt in their building would have the greatest impact on closing the achievement gap. You should know as well that before we brought this forward to you, we cut $350,000 worth of requests to bring this 2.4% budget to you. So we're proud of a lot of the things that we've done in the Marlborough Public Schools. We talk about them every 2 weeks at school committee. I don't need to recount them, but I do need to point out the fact that much work does remain. We're going to talk about tonight where those areas lie for the work, and we need to always keep in mind that we want to align our requests to the two FY17 district goals that I painted here. The third one is in here because that deals with the technology plan, which is a separate item. So on the 90th day of this school year, we showed a 55.4 low-income population. That is now 55.9. It changes every 2 weeks. We get a bi-weekly report, a very detailed report. At that point in time, on the 90th day, we had 20% EL population, with the highest percentage concentrated in the elementary schools. That is now upwards of 21% and changing on a daily basis. I was in Jarrick the other day, and I thought I had my numbers right, and I said to Mr. Sanborn, you have 834 students, and he corrected me, 838. So in that short span of time, he had gained 4 students. As you will see, Mr. Bergeron will go through in a presentation outlining the requests. We have 11.2 personnel requests. 9 of them are designed specifically and targeted in a single unified perspective of our team to look closely at advocating for those who need it the most in our district, most specifically our English language learners. Concurrent with zooming out to look at who we need to increase in terms of providing services for our students in the district, we also want to zoom in on the essential questions for interviewing. We've done a lot of work with Patty Brown, our HR director, fashioning essential questions. We don't want to just add folks to the roles. We know that adding FTEs increases the need for services on the city side as well. We want to be very strategic, but we want to make sure that we keep in mind that hiring is job one. In our district, it's our goal to attract and hire well, to retain and coach our staff intentionally, and to make available to our staff opportunities to stretch, grow, and be mentored in all aspects of leadership. So we have an elementary building project. We met about that today. It's a very exciting time in the Marlborough Public Schools and in the Marlborough City as well. It's been a refreshing year, working not only with this school committee. I realized when I looked at this the other night, I neglected to add school committee here, but of course, that goes without saying. But it has been tremendous and very rewarding collaborative experience to work with the mayor, City Hall, and the members of City Council. This year, our goal has been a culture of transparency and trust, and we believe that it has emerged and has room to grow as well. Over the past 3 years, the schools have received a 10% increase, 4.5, 4.5, and 1%. We have this year continued hard to remove extraneous support persons and to plan out an organizational chart that is more streamlined in terms of delivering services to our students. That will not be the subject of discussion this evening because we have negotiation sessions that are planned to look at that. We believe that this budget is fair, transparent, and aimed at our most diverse population in the city. And we encourage you to support it. We're here this evening to hear an overview of the budget from Mr. Bergeron. You've all received this, which I'm hoping you read. And he will give an overview without asking questions. We're asking that he be permitted to continue to the end of his presentation, and then he will look specifically at the request, the 11.2. If you have other questions that can be answered by members of the leadership team, they're happy to come up. I'm sure we can find a spot for them at the table, up there, next to the mayor maybe. And some of you have sent questions, and we appreciate the questions in advance. And I want to thank Mrs. Hennessy, Mrs. Bowden-Hedinger, and Mrs. Matthews for those. We've done our best to pull together the answers. If, when we move through the budget presentation, those questions that you asked, and some of them overlapped, which is a good thing, have not been answered, we're happy to answer those questions. Do you have any thoughts or comments about the way this will proceed? If not, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you very much. So when we look at creating the school budget, the first thing we always do is create the level service budget. And I just want to take just a quick moment and just review what level service means. What we do every year is we take what we're doing right now in the schools and we move it forward 1 year. We look at our contractual agreements. We look at the increased costs for things like transportation, any increased costs for students who may be out of district, all of those types of items. We add up those costs and we move it into the level service budget. So for this year, our level service budget is 1.97%. Part of the reason why it's lower than it has been in the past is we did have some significant turnover going into this year. Which has allowed us to kind of buoy this year's budget and also lowered next year's level service budget. So while turnover isn't always the best thing, sometimes it can help you in your budget years because we have been able to hire staff at a lower cost. It has lowered our level service budget going into next year. The other thing that I should mention is that we did not have any significant increase or decrease in our out-of-district tuitions, and our transportation contract is very favorable to us right now. It's tied to CPI. So the CPI last year, I think it was 1.7%. So a lot of districts are seeing very large increases in their transportation costs right now. We're only scheduled to do about 2% next year. So that is, again, favorable to us. Probably the most major addition in the level service budget and transportation was we added another bus to the AMSA schedule. So with all of that added in, we're still at 1.97%. We realigned a couple of accounts, but we didn't lose or gain any money. We just put it into an area of the budget to make it easier and more transparent. And I'll give you an example. We had PD split into 2 accounts in the past. One was under research materials and one was under contracted services. To make it easier, we've just combined it to 1 account now under contracted services because that's what a majority of what our PD is done as. So we didn't lose any money in that. We're just trying to make it, limit the number of accounts we're using down from the 1,600 we were before. So that's level service budget. Moving on, I'm going to come back to this. So given what Maureen said about zooming in, zooming out, right now just zooming out, looking at the big picture, our request, 11.2 FTE. So if you look at our budget, we're pretty much 82% salary, and I'll show that on one of the next upcoming slides. So all of our requests this year are salary requests. We don't have any requests that aren't salary. There's no contracted service to expand. There's no supplies. All of that we're not requesting. This is simply salaries. So when you look at these requests, a majority of them, especially in the first 5, are EL related. That's our largest growing department, as we're about to see. We've increased over 17% just this year from August 30th until now. We're over 1,000 students in the district that are requiring the EL service. So you see a lot of these requests are around supporting those students and supporting those families. In addition, we're looking to create an innovative model for 6th grade that will have a math science teacher and a ELA social studies teacher. It will create a team similar to 5th grade at the 6th grade level. Additionally, we're looking for 2 other translators. Due to the cost that we face for outside companies, we can do, this is one of those few things that, we can simply just do much better at a lower cost and get a lot more bang for our buck. And I'm going to go into that when I come back to this. Additionally, we're looking for a little bit more help at the elementary level with a math interventionist. I think Mary has some excellent data that she's going to show you about where the students are and how at the Jarrick Elementary we aren't reaching all the students, and we could do a better job if we had one more math interventionist. The high school, we're asking for a 0.2. We obviously know 0.2 would be almost impossible to fill. We have a 0.8 position that we'd be looking to make into a 1.0. So we're not looking for a person just to do 1 class a day. We're looking to take an existing 0.8, move it to a 1.0, specifically so Principal Cleary can offer courses, SEI, geometry, and algebra, and again target some of those EL students who could use a little bit more help and could benefit from a lower class size in those specific areas. So looking again at the big picture, we're zooming out. One thing we wanted to show is just the increase over time. Just this year, from August 30th until this was last week, we've gone from 846 students receiving EL service to 1,004. So actually that's more than 17%. I apologize. I think it's 18.5% at this point. So the thing we should recognize too, and I think Lynn Medalliou gave a really good presentation the other night at school committee about the changes to the access testing. So when students are deemed proficient in their academic English, they can test out of the EL services and no longer receive them. The state is determining that that bar was set too low. So they're raising that level, which means that students are going to have to test higher on the access testing to be able to test out of EL services in the future. So knowing that, seeing our increase in population, this is definitely one of the major areas we're looking at for the budget. So what I'm trying to say in the short, long and the short, is that more students are going to continue to get EL services for a longer period of time, because the bar to leave the service is going to be higher in the future. Again, I just want to just show this just so you could take a look at it. The majority of our spending is on salary. If you look at this, 82%. When you look at our costs this year and what we're asking for, we think the 2.84% is absolutely conservative. We think it's a good budget moving forward. But when we have this much salary, we do have to recognize that there are other costs that are borne by the city that aren't in our budget. I'll give you an example. So if we're asking for 11.2 FTEs, there is a cost to recognize those benefits. Those costs are held on the city side. So we do have to recognize that while our budget is increasing 2.84%, there will have to be an addition on the city side to also pay for the employee benefits that will be coming for those folks. So when we also look at the budget overall, almost all of our decisions are salary-based. We have very, very little in terms of supplies. We have 2% of our budget's in supplies. Most of our contracted services are required by law. We have to do transportation. We have to, if we have kids who are out of district, it's required. It's part of an IEP. We have to do that. So there's not a lot of decision-making in some of those areas. What we try to do is build the programs in district to keep kids here. So when we look at this pie and it's 82% salary, you kind of get an idea of year by year, our level service budget, for the most part, is run by the contracts that these salaries represent. That's what we can expect. So that's why we were pretty pleased with having a 1.97% level service budget, but most of our contracts are increasing by 2% next year. So that is, although we had a lot of turnover, it did help us. We were able to, afford a little bit more in the budget this year as far as requests. Going into our elementary class sizes. So we wanted to show this information so we give people an update of where we were when I put this together. And it is a moving target. So as you can see at Jarrick Elementary, I had 825, because at the time I put this together, it was 825. Now, as Maureen said earlier, it was 838, I believe. So it's hard to pinpoint this down at any one point. We do have changes in enrollment. But what we want to show you is how each class projects into next year. So if you see on each school, there's a left-hand column and a right-hand column. And the left-hand column is the current classes at the time we ran this, and the right-hand column would be those same classes into FY18. So as you can see, we would have some trouble spots where, grades 2 and 4 at the Jarrick Elementary at 26-1, which is a pretty high class size for elementary. At the Kane Elementary, the third grade would be 29-1, so we'd have to switch some classes around to make sure that doesn't happen. Rich Elementary currently looks pretty good for FY18. We should obviously recognize the fact that there was some construction on the west side of the city. We haven't seen any large bumps because of that, but they're not totally filled yet. So we might see some areas where we could have some increased enrollment on that side of town. So keeping these numbers low would probably be the best decision going forward. So looking at those elementary enrollments, going on to the next slide, one thing we were thinking about, which may not be feasible at this point, but it might be something that we try to do in the future, is to add some modular classrooms to try to reduce the amount, the class sizes in the elementary levels. And one scenario we were looking at would be to add some modulars to the Kane Elementary, 2 in specific, so we could possibly transfer some lines from Jarrick back to Kane to allow for a better class size mix at both schools. At this time, I'm not sure that that's feasible. I think we have to look at additional options, because between now and September, actually, I'm sorry, it's not September, we're starting before September. Between now and the first day of school, we may not be able to get all the work done to put modulars in, and we're certainly not of the opinion of doing it in the middle of the year, disrupting students. So we might need to look at some additional options on how we can support the elementary class size going forward. Some movement can be made within existing schools. At the Kane School, for example, that 29, we can certainly move a teacher from another grade and keep a relatively good class size. At Jarrick, with just the number of kids we have right now, there's not a lot we can do. The school's already using all of their spaces. We don't have any art rooms, we don't have any computer labs, I don't have a music room, so I don't have anywhere else to add a teacher in to be able to lower that down right now. Just a reminder, I think Maureen mentioned this, the two of the goals that we established, 2 of the 3, the third one is revolving around the technology plan. When we established these requests and when we went through them as a team, we kept on coming back to these 2 things. To increase student achievement, the district will strengthen and refine academic and behavioral instruction strategies to be implemented across all levels. 2, increase capacity and opportunity to support every family's participation in the Marlborough Public Schools. So I want to keep those in mind, because now I'm going to go back to the requests. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and provide some data on why exactly we're asking for those items. If you don't mind bearing with me for 1 second as I go back to my notes. So if you look at page 10 of the document, I just want to share that when we looked at our EL program, one thing that's rather tough to do is compare EL programs between school districts. So what we did is we went into the actual data that gets posted by the state. We went into every district that we could find that had a like population. So I don't go geographic. I always go to find communities that have a population similar to ours. These are the districts that I pulled out: Methuen, Peabody, Salem, Somerville, and a whole list beyond that. And what I was looking for specifically was how many students in their district were receiving EL service. The second I wanted to know is how many staff members they had who were designated EL, who were providing the EL service. So that way it gave us a student to staff ratio and an average What you don't see here is that there were a couple districts that we kicked out because they were outliers. They were so far above the student-staff ratios that they actually statistically didn't fit the model. And that might be just how that district codes their people within the state system. We call it EPIMS. So what I did is I kicked those two schools out because they were so far out of the range. And what we were left with was a pretty good list of like districts to give us a student-to-staff ratio. The average is 44.8. And I think understanding that this is just an average. There is no written policy that we have that says this is our student-to-staff ratio. But staying around that 40-to-1 ratio, I think is 40 can still be a very high caseload for a lot of people, especially when you're talking about students with no English. They have limited or no English, just came in, and we're just starting that process. So right now, when I pulled this data, and you can see that how quickly this changes, when I put this report together, there was 920 students in Marlborough. We had a 35-to-4 ratio. 35-to-1 ratio. Which meant we had 26 staff members providing EL services. So now we're up over 1,000. So right now we're at 38.6. Understanding that we're expecting growth in this area, and students in our district are going to need these services longer because they're not going to test out of this as fast. We did ask to add a teacher at the elementary level and a teacher at the high school level. So 2 teaching FTEs added to keep us at around that 40-to-1 ratio, which we think is kind of the sweet spot if you look at all the districts. Another thing that we asked for is we asked for 3 para-educator positions. The reason we're asking for the 3 para-educator positions is we're looking specifically to be able to keep kids in their academic core classes with support. So we don't want to consistently be pulling kids out of the academic courses to have the EL service. We want them to be in the academic courses, and we want them to be supported by EL para-educators when appropriate. There's times when they can do it, and there's times when they can't. But what this would allow the Whitcomb to do, for example, is have 1 at every grade level. So that way they'd have 1 paraeducator at every grade level to be able to push kids in and push them into some supports. At the high school, again, adding an extra FTE would allow them to push a lot more kids into classes as well. So that's why we asked for those paraeducators. With the increase to the program overall, with now having over 1,000 students receiving this service, we asked for 1.0 office support for this program. And part of the reason for that is because currently we have the directors and the coordinators performing clerical duties. They're filing work, they're filing tests, they're filing things that, frankly, is more of an office support job, but not something that we can currently handle within the district. So we're looking for a 1.0 office support to support this program district-wide and be able to take that burden off them so that way they can focus on curriculum instruction. We think that with the growth of this program and the anticipated growth, we feel it's a pretty strong request because this as we're seeing the trend here, this is only going to grow. And as we've also seen from the state, it seems like the mandates are also growing. Every time we turn around, we tend to get more information that we have to provide, not less. So, and that tends to be a trend right now with providing these services. Looking at the 6th grade half team, if I can point you to page 11, just wanted to quickly talk about what we're trying to do here. So at the 5th grade level, we currently have 16 classrooms. Moving to 6th grade, we have 12. And what we're trying to do is create, similar to the 5th grade team model, we would have a math science person and a humanities person, like an ELA and social studies, and they would be, we call it a half team on this model. They would be a team within 6th grade to support targeted students. Students who right now in grade 5 who could potentially use an extra year of that model, who could be supported better in that model in grade 6. In addition, talking to Principal Daniels, they would also really want to target students in the EL level 3, so that way they can push them into more academic courses and support them better. So we would be looking for folks who had not only licensure at those levels, but possibly licensure in delivering EL services. So when you look at the budget, you notice I wrote 1.0 math teacher, 1.0 EL teacher. I have to put 2 places somewhere in the budget. I don't know where they're going to come from, so those are placeholders right now. What we would do, if approved, is we would post the positions, go through the internal process, see who's certified to be able to do these positions, and then we might have to move the position to wherever that person was. So it might say math teacher, but it might be someone else who, might be a science teacher who applies for the position and wants to do that. I might have to switch that later on down the line if this is approved. Looking at the translators, just want to go to page 8 for a moment. Excuse me while I get a drink. So our translation services have been growing for years, and a couple years ago we decided to try to build an internal capacity to be able to handle the amount of translation services we do. This goes far beyond just translating IEP documents or translating progress reports. What these folks are doing for us now, they're attending team meetings and providing translation services there. They are providing support to our principals when our principals need to communicate with our parents. They're going to community events. They're doing so much more for us than what was envisioned in the beginning because the need is there and the need is growing. So as we continue to have these types of community events and we're seeing what our population is presenting as, we need to continue this support. I think the long-term goal and what we've talked about publicly is to be able to have a support like this in every building. And we're growing to that. We don't think we can get there all in 1 year. We're not trying to do that. But grow the program slower and methodically so we expand the services district-wide, and eventually we have a pool of people that we can have them at every building to provide this service. In addition, we can do this significantly cheaper than what we can do in the private sector. So our current range is about $16 to $18 an hour because we can offer competitive benefits, health insurance, city pension. There's a lot of benefits to working at MPS. On the private side, we got quotes from close to 30 companies on the OSD state bid list. We also went outside the bid list and talked to other companies, and the ranges were between $40 and $70 an hour. Additionally, that it's more expensive if you need it in a shorter time frame. Whereas we don't have, there is no more additional expense when we have people internally doing that cost. We pay extra when we need it on a shortened time frame from a vendor. So looking at those items, we want to grow within currently because it is very expensive to do this outside, and it's not a choice. We have to do this. So regardless if we are able to get the translators or not, we still have to provide the service, which means we still have to find the resources to do it, regardless of whether we're doing it internally or we're sending it to a vendor outside. Looking at the next request for math interventions on page 11. Mary has some fantastic data on this, and I think we'll throw it to her in a moment just to talk about it. But at the high school, there's a 0.2 request. We have a current 0.8 position. We'd like to move that to a 1.0. That would allow the high school to offer additional courses in geometry and algebra, which would lower some of the class sizes there and provide probably a better learning environment for some of our students who are struggling. So that's why there's a 0.2. Obviously, we know we can't fill a 1 class a day position. We're trying to increase it to a 1.0. At the Jarrick Elementary, again, as we've mentioned several times, 838 students. We have 1 math interventionist. We're looking to increase that to 2 math interventionists so we can spread the support across all the grades. And I know there's some specific questions that came about. So I was wondering, Mary, if you just want to talk about the data that you brought to the table specific to Jarrick.
So there was a couple of questions. So on the front page, it's just a little bit, I think there were some questions about the difference between a specialist and an interventionist. And so that's what the first chart is. But on the back is specific to Jarrick School. And there were some questions about the level, the tiered levels of the students currently enrolled. And this data is from Mr. Sanborn as of today. And currently, there is no math support allocated to the 177 students in kindergarten at Jarrick School, because the specialist is mainly focused, if you see on the other side, she does intervention groups, she's supporting 2 classes in grades 1 through 4 in each grade, so a total of 8. She has one intervention group separate from that in grade 3 and one intervention group in grade 4. So extra support in grades 3 and 4. And if you turn around and if you look at the tiered data there, you will see that the need is greatest this year, currently in grade 3 and 4. And for example, you have almost 50% of grade 3 and grade 4 students that are showing up in tier 2 and 3. That's impossible for one person to address as much interventions. Probably, I think Mr. Sanborn would probably be able to sit up here and argue that he probably needs 5. But for right now, the request is for one additional person. If you also turn over and you look over, the one other school that has that model currently is Richard School. So we wanted to show you some of the data about what that interventionist does. So at Richard School, currently, that interventionist sees 43 students, 7 to 8 periods every day. So every day, the same 43 students. On top of that, she sees 3 kindergarten push-in groups a week. And additionally, she's able to offer a couple of enrichment classrooms as well through the intervention enrichment block. And so that is why we're putting forward this request for Jarrick School.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate it. At this time, I don't have any other materials for the presentation, so I'm not sure if it would be best if we round about some of the questions that we've already received or what the committee's will is.
Shall we target the questions to these requests at this point and then move on to the questions that you had forwarded to us? To take it in
Questions from the
segments?
committee? No questions? Entertain a motion to approve. This is Hennessy.
Why do I go first? No. No, because I wasn't going to let him move forward a budget. Thank you.
Yeah.
You can get whatever you need. Chair, whatever. So thank you for all the information, first off. Gosh, where to begin? Modular classrooms. Let me go for a big one. How about that?
I'm sorry,
What?
just to, I think, clarify, if we could entertain questions on these 11.2 first?
Okay.
Or is that?
We can do that.
Would that be,
Just,
and then move to the questions that you asked?
okay. You can't really put people in places if you don't have space either, so.
Okay.
So either way, that's cool. EL, it's fine.
Are there questions on these specific? And I know they wrap into other things, of course they do. Okay, so we'll move to the questions you asked then. Perfect. We have the list of the questions. Would you like to go first? Is that what I hear?
I think it sounds like some of ours are overlapping.
They are. They are.
I mean, EL-wise, I guess overarching question really is, obviously, there's a need for support for English support, but I'm assuming there's going to need to be a lot of math support with students, and especially if we have students coming in larger amounts that are in Tier 1. How are we, I mean, that math specialist that's, being asked for, and I'm assuming the math specialists that are here are not necessarily bilingual, unless that was a great requirement that we added in forethought. So I'm just curious how we're handling this, because, you can't move forward in content. That's great if you learn English, but how do you move them forward appropriately if they're not getting the math content too, to move along with them? So I'm just wondering how this is all moving forward together, because you can't address one and not handle the other and really matriculate them up appropriately.
So while Lynn is coming up, everything we post from now on will have a dual certification preferred.
Kinda
you know.
needs to.
So, SEI is no longer preferred, that is required, the endorsement, but we're going to continue to look more and more for that dual certificate, from office support to administrators.
Yep.
So,
Hi.
Lynn, thank you.
Excellent. So the math question, excellent question. When we're looking at Wickham, and I'll just start there, because as the students get older, it's when the gap gets larger and larger, if we're talking about everything, but especially math and math knowledge. We have currently, and we have for quite a few years now, One of the ELD classes that the students take with the EL teachers is called the language of math. And it's very specifically called that because it is looking at the language of that subject, because each subject has its own language, quite honestly, you know, and its own grammar structures that go with it. And during that time, not only do the teachers talk about language necessary to understand math problems and to answer math problems, but they do also help support what's going on in the classroom. In fact, that was one of the reasons we at first had the EL teachers also in the math classes, to have that bridge. They would go into the math class with the students, know exactly what was going on, and be able to then be in the language of math class with them, and really talk about the language and the problems and support them that way. And so during that time, there is some intervention, some remediation if necessary for certain students, if they need it. They're able to do that at that time as well. In addition, at Whitcomb, we're excited, you know, recently, as we've mentioned before, we've had this influx of students with very limited schooling. So just about a few weeks ago, I think, there were a number of students who came to us with needs that we wanted to make sure we met. So we've created a, we're calling it EL literacy, although it really is literacy and math support. And we have our reading specialist and our math specialist at Whitcomb working with a group of 8 students, 1 period a day. So they split them 4 and 4, and they work on basic math and literacy skills on the students that we've identified as needing this based on our intake procedures and our screening that we have. For the exact reason you're saying, if you can't keep up with the language, if you don't have the language, and in addition you have these needs, it can be very challenging. So those are 2 different types of EL students. You know, those students will also be in the language of math class, so they get math, language of math, and then they're getting this intervention time as well, which is half math. And the students who are not SLIFE would be getting regular math and the language of math. When you go up into the high school level, we have separate courses for students at low English proficiency levels. And that is taught for the most part by EL staff. However, we've been working on building capacity with other teachers, especially after the SEI endorsement. We had quite a few years of many classes where the EL teachers would work with content teachers, building capacity, their ability to then be able to meet the needs of those students. We don't have, the majority of our EL staff is not bilingual, interestingly enough. And so we really can't rely on that to support us. But that actually works out to be a good thing, because I have had the moment where I'm relying on my Spanish, and then we have a student from Vietnam move in, and I am lost. So it's actually a nice sort of reminder that our instruction is English, that we can support in other languages if we're able to. We can have the students support each other in other languages. We can use apps and computer programs and whatever else, but the language of instruction is English.
So then let me push you further, though. We've always talked about, just in general ed population, the sooner that we can get them the information at the younger ages, the better. So you've talked about Whitcomb and high
Thank you.
school. How are we addressing it at elementary? Because if we're not addressing it younger, we're only backing up and having more problems later on.
Right.
So we're creating our own issues.
In elementary, and it would depend a little bit on schools, although like we've said, we're trying to have parity in the 3 different schools. In the elementary schools, the EL teachers predominantly teach ELD, which makes sense. However, they are often in classroom supporting. We used to do that a lot more when the numbers were a little bit lower. We do have them in their classes. Remember that those low-level ELP level students get 2.5 hours of English. During that time, there is the language of math portion in there as well. We also have our teachers, I know at Jarrick, our teachers during the math intervention block are giving math intervention to their EL students. And then we've been able to recently in Jarrick as well, for the exact reason you're stating, we've had teachers up their support in the 4th grade math classes due to the influx of students and really trying to give them a boost to be ready for 5th grade.
Because, I mean, the concern obvious, which I'm sure Ron can, attest to immediately, the numbers at Jarrick are absolutely outrageous. And I mean, that's why I was asking about the modular classrooms, because you can throw staff, but if you don't have the space to start teaching the kids, what are we doing? So that to me is why I was bringing up the modular classrooms, because yes, I see the need at Kane, but to me, I think we're being a little short-sighted if we're only looking at adding something to Kane. It seems kind of obvious. But that's not going to solve all of it, right? That's kind of a Band-Aid. So, which modular is, but to me, it's like, you know, why aren't we also then looking at addressing some of our numbers issues, which would still be there at JARC by looking at, you know, whether it was modular at JARC. Now, again, not my area of expertise, but it seems like we need more space, and it's obvious, you know, and we can't do it all the time, but we have a very obvious issue. And we can't address some of these needs necessarily that you're talking about from an EL standpoint if we can't get to the kids because we don't have the space to do it. And I can't even envision how a teacher can really spread the wealth of knowledge and make sure they're hitting all the core content when they have 25, 26, 27, 28 kids, and they're obviously going to be all over the mark, whether we're talking about EL students, general population, or special education. So, you know, again, not my area of expertise, but from a common sense standpoint, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't want to just kick the can forward and think that we're going to finally get to them somewhere along the way. How do we aim that money and get it, you know, most cost-efficient way where it's bang for buck and, you know, we're getting to them.
I can't speak to the modulars, obviously, because that wouldn't either be my area, but thinking of math support and more specifically EL students, what has really helped is the mindset that we've been working on for the past 3 years of like the MTSS. We look at the students, what their needs are, and that would exactly explain the EL literacy class that we have going on at Wickham. We looked at a need, we sat down with a team, we brainstormed on what we could possibly, what was our, in fact, Rupa Patel and I sat with Brian Daniels, what do we wish we could have? And then worked backwards to what we could do. And quite honestly, they weren't as far apart as I would think because of, we've worked very hard to get the programs close to what we think is ideal. And so even in elementary, yeah, there's a lot of kids and there's not a lot of space. However, we look at the students, what they're getting. We look at how we can have the staff move what they're doing. We're looking at, you know, our kindergarten students receive EL services. So in JARC, we spoke with Ron Sanborn. Okay, those really high-level kindergartners. We met and talked about, do we think for the rest of the year we could pull back on their services to offer more math services? So it's very, it's something that we're able to maneuver a lot. And that's, I think, what has been the strength of the leadership team. And I like to think the EL program as well. We've always been crazy flexible. We get students every week and we need to start all over. I mean, that's just our thing. But working with the team has been so great in that we are all open to trying something new and different and making it work. Yeah, I would love classes of 20 and we all have our own, you know, classes out looking at a veranda of whatever, you know, but, and hopefully we'll get there. But I think that the teams and the teachers are, and I know you know this, I know this is not what you're saying, doing absolutely everything they can, exactly.
Completely
Yeah.
agree. And I would not, you know, not take anything away from the efforts that are putting forward. I'm just concerned that our numbers have considerably risen and are rising each and every day, you know, as you pointed out. And I'm not the only one sitting with concerns, obviously. There are many others that have that same concern, but how do we then move money to make sure that we're focusing it in on the right things?
And I add something too, because Lynn has worked a lot with the elementary leaders on, and Michelle as well, on ensuring that ELD services is not the intervention these children receive. So that when we're talking about the interventionists, and when we're talking about intervention blocks, we're talking about an equal access and these students being in the classroom and receiving those at the same time. So when Ron's asking for an interventionist, he's asking for an additional service for these children as well.
Somebody else jump in. Go ahead.
Can I just say, number-wise, we run a biweekly report. We're only plus 31 since the beginning of the year. I mean, that's just some data. That's not broken by who they are. But with what we began with and what we are right now, we are plus 31 students district-wide, okay? Now granted, many of them are SLIFE students, many of them are EL that have come in. You heard Mike talk about the rise there. But in looking at the big picture, we're at 4,586, which is plus 81 from day one. So just to put that in perspective.
Plus 81 or plus 31?
Plus 31, sorry, plus 31.
Sorry.
31,
It's like-
sorry, I don't want to make it any more than it is. Plus
50
31.
kids in a moment, no.
Plus 31.
Other questions?
Okay, so then I'll ask a clarifying question if I can. So on this that you handed out, Mary?
Yep.
Kindergarten, no math support allocated to this grade level 177. So no math support in addition to no EL math support, like no,
So the students, so there are, during the intervention blocks, there's no math specialist working with
With them.
kindergarten at any time at Jarrick School right now.
okay. I know I was kind of last minute on this, so you may not have this at this point, but are we in a position where elementary grade levels, class sizes, not just averages, are we able to understand that broad reach of really how much are we on a per classroom basis? Not just averages.
I think this is what you're looking for.
Okay.
Broken by the rooms, the actual
Yeah.
rooms with the actual students in them.
Thank you.
There's some coming, Mary. There's enough. Making a pile for Earl. Thank you. Can I have one of these for Earl?
Yes, of course.
Yes, sure.
Yeah,
Um,
keep
Can I
going.
ask a totally different kind of a question?
Sure, and you have
This is
several
one
here
that
that,
I
you have
asked
several
you.
here, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I was just curious if you could give us an update, the per pupil
Cool.
spending
Yeah.
for the
Instructional
instructional
materials.
materials
Mhm.
that you described sounds to me like what we did last year with the non-instructional materials. And I'm just
Yeah.
curious how that went.
It's a good question.
Did everybody get the pencils they needed? I mean, did that?
I have not had any reports that we've not gotten the pencils we've needed. But if you remember last year, we tried to even out some of the general supply lines. And it was $30 per student in secondary and $60 per student at the elementary, only because they buy more copy paper and more of the art supplies that are, general in nature. And that seems to have worked pretty well. We also took some areas that were out of whack, and we just divided it out over the number of kids. We didn't look at the spending. We just divided it out to give a per pupil cost. What we're doing in this budget is actually targeting money to certain areas. So we're looking at where the money is spent and then trying to actually manage and say, okay, let's see where that should be going, as opposed to, well, it's always been there, let's continue to have it there and keep it, going year after year. So the model, I guess, we're trying to get to eventually, which is it's slowly building, is that each year when we look at all of these accounts, all we have to do is simply run the enrollment report and then look at the per pupil spending and then multiply it out to see whether we're up or down in every school. It doesn't work exactly like that every year. The principals need flexibility, but I'd say the school committee gives them great flexibility, because whenever I bring transfers, we talk about them. I mean, we've been pretty transparent on where we're moving money. So I think they feel like they can move money as needed. So if they need something for one discipline that maybe they'll do without in another one, they know they have that ability to do that. But I can't speak for the principals, but I have not had any of them come to me and say they haven't had enough money this year to be able to run their buildings. So,
And I noticed that in the breakdown, in the description, there's obviously more money for certain departments than others, you know?
Yes.
Math uses more consumables than social studies probably, or something like that. So, you know, you need one map for the classroom as opposed to 25 whatevers for the, you know,
Right.
so that makes sense.
and we tried to target some areas too. So historically, for example, EL funding per pupil has been a little bit lower. They were almost at like $4 or $5 per pupil. We tried to bump that up because they need a lot more support and a lot more curriculum support. And unfortunately, sometimes the Title III grant, those don't always give us the support we need. You know, the Title I, Title II, Title III, they're wonderful. We appreciate all the funding we get, but they're not always enough to be able to build curriculum in the district and be able to build it the way we want it to. So what we're trying to do is target some of those areas so that way year after year we'll be able to have a good foundation in each.
That's a lot of work. I commend you all for doing that, because I know.
And it's a little bit of an experiment, let's be honest. I
Right.
mean, we're
Sure.
we're
Well,
gonna have to
that's
see
why-
how it works.
And that's why I was asking about, because last year was the experiment with the non-instructional materials. So, great, thank you.
No complaints so far.
So Mike, piggybacking on that,
I don't
and
see any.
No.
piggybacking on that, and what, referring to a question that I asked was, you just said that not assuming that what was spent before will be spent again. And I know when we go back to the old way of doing the budgets, and years ago, and every department head would come in and, I spent $15,000 last year, and I'm gonna need at least $15,000 next year, and even though they probably needed $2,000, they still asked for the $15,000.
Absolutely correct.
So, are the purchase of textbooks included in this, or is that being taken out of the equation? Because obviously, some years there will be a bump, and,
We don't specifically put like a line in the for textbook adoption, but what we've been able to do, I think pretty successfully, is that when we have needed a curriculum adoption, we talk about it as a leadership team, and then we determine what resources we're gonna use to fund it. So, in the past couple of years, just off the top of my head, we used existing resources, not any additional funding, to be able to purchase the entire Go Math. We use existing resources to purchase the entire foundations and Journeys reading programs. And additionally, it hasn't really hurt our ability to replace textbooks at the higher levels as well. They've been able to use their amounts of funding to be able to do that. The overall, if you look at it, we have about $600,000 in instructional materials for the whole district. So a lot of times when we sit back and look at that, we watch the spend down, and we know there might be a couple areas where we can recoup money, and that's a discussion we have to say, okay, if we can't use it on that, can we instead use it to support Chromebooks? Can we use it to instead support a new application that we want to use on the computers?
On the Chromebook.
That's really what we're doing all the time, is trying to see, okay, from that pool of money, if we know we're not going to spend it in one area, let's pull it back and let's try to use it somewhere else. We get some more bang for the buck.
and I'm assuming based on looking at this year to the projected next year, the adjustments are based on the actuals that you've seen already, and
And the projected
the
need.
projected,
Yep.
yeah.
So if you look at, like, for example, like the ELA for the elementary, that was basically a discussion where I'm asking, Mary, how much do we need to actually buy for the curriculum that we've adopted? What do we need per pupil to be able to support foundations and journeys moving forward? And that's really what we're trying to build it on. And then create some parity between some of the other departments where there hasn't been parity in the past.
Makes sense, okay. Thank you. Oh, this was just, what is a vision specialist?
Sure. A vision specialist is a special education teacher who specializes in vision and mobility
Well, no,
services.
but it was where it showed up. I
Yeah.
did not want to make an assumption that we're talking about somebody who's looking at something.
So we're looking to build an in-district program around that.
Okay.
And we feel it would, the costs of sending students out to these schools for this specific disability is very expensive. We think we can build a program in-district that's just as good, and we can staff it. We're currently working to negotiate with the paraeducators to get a vision paraeducator, so that way they can support with curriculum modifications. The vision specialist would be, it's a certified position, that person would help us build this program in the district.
Thank you.
Is the goal for just kids that have low vision issues or
Heather.
fully blind?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, teaching Braille and everything.
Yes.
It's a whole, we have some students in the district who have significant disabilities in that area and some mild to moderate who require assistance. Our goal is to have students fully included within the educational environments, but they do require support. And the paras, individuals working with these students do need training around the Braille machines and other types of devices these children need to be successful in the school environments. But the goal is to have the students completely integrated, fully included into the school settings. But we do need the supports. Currently, we contract these services out, and it's better and more fiscally responsible for us beginning to look at building those services here in the district and having someone on staff. We do have enough students in the district that would require that support and also require those assessments at this time.
So we do currently have students who are using Braille machines in the district?
We do.
Yes, we do. Yes.
I did not know that.
Awesome.
Awesome.
It's great.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
I'll go for another class size question then if I can.
Sure.
We had talked about in the, I don't know, fall, winter, about some issues with class sizes, specifically I think at Whitcomb relative towards some of the
Wellness.
specialists and wellness
Wellness,
programs.
yes.
I'm curious as to how that has moved forward and how that's been addressed so those sizes are not so large. I'd like to understand where we're sitting with those numbers now.
Mr. Daniels?
We worked hard in the fall to rebalance. The option that we gave to music students to take up to 4 days of performance-based music created an unexpected problem with the number of students now taking 4 days of PE rather than 3. And that's where the imbalance came from. We have 2 different kinds of PE assignments and 2 different kinds of music assignments. The music option was there in order to allow students to take a full chorus assignment as well as a full instrumental choice. So we have balanced the groups, but they remain on the PE wellness side in a number of cases still much larger than we want them to be. The solution, we have the personnel necessary to balance these into next year with a schedule change. So what will happen is there won't be if you choose a performance track in music and you want to do chorus as well, or chorus is your choice, but you'd like to also have some time with an instrument, you have to do that within a 3-day window. So now we'll be dividing evenly 3 and 3, and that will bring our numbers back into the levels they were before.
I'm shaking my head because I think that's really a deterrent to the music program, which we've already caused issues with the music program with the way that things have changed. We've asked students in elementary to sign up by taking their own recess to move forward on getting involved in chorus. And so now we're squelching that time even more. So I'm very concerned to hear that we're trying to change it once again instead of enhancing and working with our music program and allowing children the opportunity of experiencing both chorus and music at a good option, which I think you all had come up with, on having 2 days of chorus, 2 days of an instrument of some sort, and still fulfilling the physical education or wellness situation. So I'm really not sure I'm understanding then why are we looking at decreasing that time for music and not looking at a different solution for making sure that that number is satisfied. And I'd like to understand, you're saying, what are our numbers of children that are in the wellness program? What are we talking about?
Well,
How
the
many kids?
entire school is in the wellness program.
Well, right, but what I'm talking about is when we talked about the class sizes being larger and that you were addressing it, I want to understand what was addressed and what are our numbers currently then for those class sizes?
Some of the wellness exceptions and the extremes, I believe there's 139 still out there, and then a couple of 35 or 36, and then the vast majority back into 30 and 31 with some lower. And the imbalance is in trying to meet the needs of this 4 and 2 structure and the mix of students at all grade levels having that option. This 3 and 3, what that will give our students on the music side is 3 full performance days. So if you decided to take an instrument, today you would have 2 days of instrument, or 2 days of instrument and 2 days of chorus, which is a smaller group of students who chose both of those things. Now you'll have 3 days of an instrument, and within the music department, they have agreed that they would make arrangements for students who would like to have a single day of one or the other. So no one will lose the option of having an instrument and chorus, but there would be, if you want an instrument and chorus, that second choice would be for a single day rather than for 2.
So can I add to this too? Because this is fulfilling a request from the music department. Because they really, when you go down to the 2 hours, the music department wanted the 3 hours for the band and orchestra. They thought it was really important to maintain that. They also thought they would have the flexibility in the program to be able to maintain students to be able to do both. So what they're saying is that this new model of 3 and 3 meets their needs as a department.
As opposed to keeping kids out of both options.
But they said that they will allow students to maintain both options with that 3, but a majority, that Jonathan had all the numbers and looked at how many students were doing both, and the 3 driving factor of 3 band is basically really where it really needs the time, because you're also doing some instrumental, some instruction on how to play the instruments during that time. He needed that extra hour on a regular basis.
So is this going back to where music was looking for crossover time, so they would have performance time together to overlap and, meet some of the concerning needs where they weren't having the
Grade level.
It's
Yeah,
more
the grade
it's
levels.
more consistent per each grade for 3 hours of band altogether.
Right, but
So-
I think what she's asking is
Not
there was
7 and 8 together.
7, 8
No.
won't be able to play together. No.
So we're
So we're still
not
facing that
addressing
issue.
that concern of grouping the groups together so
Correct.
that they can actually get their time. And now we're also looking at a potential decrease for some of the students that have
Merge or
had,
both, right.
have been able to do both band and chorus or orchestra and chorus, correct?
If in that much smaller group that was choosing 2 and 2, yes, that.
Well, right, I guess I would also say, because of how we have been funneling, we are pushing them to make more of those limitations as opposed to providing them the opportunity, which had been there previously.
So I think what Jonathan was saying is a majority of the students will pick up an extra hour of their performing group a week. So the band students will go from 2 hours to 3 hours for a majority of them. And the students that are doing both will have a decrease of 1 hour overall.
Of whatever their
Yes,
second.
of whatever their second choice is.
So they have to go ahead and make a primary choice of which music is their.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. But it will maintain both.
Both. Thank you.
I can see both sides, Joe.
Thank you. We actually had a labor management meeting the other day, and this was brought up. And we had representatives from Whitcomb School, and they were complimentary with the, I won't say compromise that was worked out, but very pleased with what they came to as a solution, the teachers. And so,
Yeah, really
one
concerning
problem-
about the wellness numbers, though. I would say 39 kids, 35, 36 kids in a wellness class. I can't even envision, like, that must be a fun dodgeball game. I mean, that's kind of crazy.
Can I go back to the modular question, or the growth? I know, Mike, you said you didn't understand my question, but I guess part of it's because we really haven't been included in the conversations of the building committee, which I get, but in looking at the populations of the buildings, and I guess my hope is that that the building committee, when looking at building a new building, Richard's at, roughly 500 kids right now, that it's being looked at as a projected number, a number of, I'm gonna pick a number and say 700. But even though we haven't had a massive growth number, we seem to be on the incline again, where we had started to go down and going up again. Obviously, the changes of our demographics and the needs and the reason why we even entered into looking for another building or to build another building, we can draw lines on a map 500 times and come up with different things. But is there a reason why a year ago, we were told we'd be at capacity for fiscal year 18. And it kind of scares me a little to hear you say, we may not be ready to put a modular on any building for the fall, when we knew where we were gonna be. And is there a reason why it's only Kane we're looking at? I would think we have physically the space available to do it at Jarrick as well, without having to keep moving lines. You say, we'll move a kindergarten class. Well, it's not as simple. We all know that. It affects siblings, it affects, the trickle down is enormous. The less we can do to move lines, the better we are. And we know the numbers haven't been huge for the development on the west side of town, but there's gonna be some.
Chances are we're not putting any modulars anyplace other than Kane, Kane. There's too much site work and additional constraints with the other buildings. So, that being said, the only one we'd be looking at is Kane. As far as the modulars go, the discussions have started as to whether we will be purchasing modulars for the upcoming year, how many it will be, and when they'll be available to use. I think when we had our last meeting, which was a while ago, we were told at that time that we'd be fine through this year. We'd have to make some decisions. And I got to go back on my notes, because once we sat down today, I didn't have a chance to go back and look. But I thought we were talking approximately 4 months to order the modulars and get them in place.
That was my recollection,
Okay.
is that the last meeting we had,
Yeah.
it was my understanding that we were going with either 2 or 4 modulars adding on to Kane, and that it was a go, that that we were getting the information to make it happen.
But it was a quick timeline to order them and get them.
But our last meeting was almost a good 6-7 months ago, that I don't know why we're hearing today that it might not be happening.
Well, we're taking a look at it. What we met on today was building a new building. That's a priority right now.
No, I
And
understand
we're
that.
gonna work with the modulars and try to get in what we can, but it's $1 million we're throwing out the window. So we just need to be clear on that.
Well,
So if there are alternatives that we have an opportunity to look at, that's what we're gonna do.
And I hear what you're saying, and I'm not sure if I agree with the $1 million being thrown out the window. We've made very good use of the modulars we've put on existing buildings.
That have been there for
We
like
have
25
turned them
years.
in, even the MSBA is pretty proud of how our buildings look with these modulars that have been sitting there. Yeah, Mr. Gallone's done a wonderful job, and I would assume,
Yeah.
We'll continue.
we're right, and if that's the expansion we're looking at for something like Kane, I'm sure it can continue, and maybe they get back their art classroom, and they get, when things all settle down with a new building. So I would hope that it's not just throwing money to the wind. That wouldn't be a wise decision to make either, but it would be a decision that supports the growth that we currently have.
There's not, the growth we currently had, first of all, is seasonal. If you look over the years, it's been pretty consistent. In fact, it's been dropping substantially for 6 or 7 years now. All right? So you can shake your head, but the numbers are right in front of you.
Yes.
So it's gonna fluctuate up and down on a daily basis, depending on who's on vacation and what country. You know, that's the way it is, and we need to get used to it. But the goal right now is to get a new building up, a larger building than we have today, so we have the additional space. The question is, what do we do over and above that? You know, is there something we do over and above that? We're looking at different locations to find out if we add a fourth elementary school or if we build where we are. The architect and the project manager are gonna take a look at other locations. But there's a time constraint, and as far as the modulars go, it's to get us really through the next 3 years. So that's the crunch time. After that, we should be in pretty good shape. So,
I completely agree. It's the things that the district or the superintendent is asking for, things that, as Catherine said before, if you put them out there, are they really going to help the kids because we don't have the space to put them somewhere? So that's where my concern is. You know, and as Denise is saying, if we all, you know, a year ago, we knew we needed modulars. So that, I'm just trying to get a better understanding. Are we going to be able to execute what they're asking for? So.
Did you want to answer a question, Mike?
Heidi, to your first question about what the MSBA approved us for, so if we're looking just to replace Richard as it is now, they've approved us for an enrollment of that school up to 675 kids.
So 700 wasn't off far by far.
Right. No, you were close, but I just wanted to let you know that they also see what we see, and that's why they approved us up to that amount for enrollment. So if we simply rebuilt, that's the enrollment they're looking for long-term, because remember, they're always looking at, they want this to last, and also their enrollment projections say that would be about the appropriate number, which would allow us to redistrict and take some of the heat off some of the other buildings.
Correct. Got it. Okay, thank you.
what else?
Oh, so I
Questions?
had asked about where the money for that was in the budget, because I didn't see it in the regular budget, but I also didn't see it in the capital. So that's something that you're
Yep.
just dealing with for facilities? I mean, that's coming from a different pot of money?
We're gonna have to find the money.
Good thing we didn't get much snow this year.
Yeah, the money's gone. They spent the money. We're only over by $1.7 million.
Other questions that we haven't gotten to? You had a couple, Mrs. Hennessy, about the open science position, open Spanish position, VHS.
You can answer the VHS one if you like.
Sure.
So the VHS, before I had arrived, there had been a tuition agreement with another district, and they had given us money to be able to access our programming. We're spending that money down on VHS for the next couple of years until that revolving account is done, and then we're closing it. So we will have no impact on the budget for a couple of years.
Can we understand, though, at least from a planning standpoint, approximately how much money that is taking each year so that we can?
Sure, 10,000.
Okay.
Yep,
I
and
just
we
think we
had
need to
40
have
in the
like a
account.
placeholder of understanding how much money is going towards that. So, you know, to me, it's kind of like when we pay, you know, for certain positions out of like a Title I funding.
Sure.
Eventually, you know, we may not get such and such grant, and we have to worry about where that's coming from, so.
You had asked for a rundown of open positions. That may help to, I think Mr. Bergeron has that, but that may help to shed light on the Spanish position.
Right.
There is not a Spanish
Right,
position.
you and I
that
talked
is-
about it, that
Right.
French teacher.
The French teacher left. The person teaching Spanish was dual certified, now teaches French, and we
And we
hired
hired a Spanish
a
teacher.
Spanish teacher. So there is no opening in world language. That is neutral, but
And the science teacher situation.
I can let Mr. Caleri talk about that, but I know the answer very quickly is that he switched it out for an EL teacher, and an EL teacher was just recently posted, Mrs. Brown, right? And there are a couple of candidates he's looking at, you know, always looking for that best candidate, and could possibly switch it back, but that was his need at the present time.
So this EL teacher, is that satisfying the need for the one EL teacher that was requested
No.
within the
It's in
budget?
addition No, to. it's in
Or this is
addition to.
addition to?
Would you like Mr. Caleri to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
The position we're referring to is the numbers from the beginning of the year have increased in our EL population by about 60 students, 54, I think to be exact. So we started the year at about 99 students in our EL program. We've gone to about 154 last I checked. Might be 155 today. And the majority of those students, 70% or so, are fall in a level 1, level 2 category. So our ELD classes, which are running 2 periods per day, to provide these students with the required English language. The class sizes are increasing pretty significantly and dramatically. So we've been trying to put this off until the semester because we were looking based on projected numbers. And then when the semester changed, the second semester, that's when we said we have to do this. So we have posted the position and we have some applicants, so that's the next piece. But if we look at our trajectory or what our projection would be for next year based on our trajectory over the past couple of years, we're going to have an additional need for another EL teacher as well.
And what kind of class size numbers are we talking about for these EL classes? I'm guessing fairly large.
Some, I mean,
was gonna
I
say
have
per
one
grade.
that's at like a 28.
Yeah.
And these are first year in the country.
So like
Is that
tier
math
one.
class? So that's where
you need
Tier
it.
one,
Your
Math
big
class.
like-
Yeah.
Yes.
So of the
Lovely.
42 SLIFE students currently, 25 of them are at the high school. So that's a class right there.
Well, it's actually
Well,
2 classes.
It's 2 classes.
Two.
Plus 3 periods per day. So, and plus we're also talking about Lynn, Lisa, myself, and others, leadership team folk, are talking about changes to the EL program as well. So we're taking that into account with how we best support students and provide staffing.
Okay, and then I'll go to my math question then. How are we addressing those math needs? Because I'm assuming if they're coming in tier one, we're talking about students that are coming in with pretty drastic, not only EL needs, but ELA needs, but also pretty heavy-duty math needs, right?
I'm twofold. One is because the request that we have in the budget for the .2 math
Right.
would actually free up some additional sections, or at least a section, to support EL students as well, in addition to algebra and geometry.
Okay.
So last year, if you remember when we came to this table, we talked about adding licensed math folk to teach mathematics to some of our students who are coming from other countries, so our EL population. What our look for in our EL pieces, we're looking for people who have also potentially some background in mathematics too, as a means of providing this. But a lot of our folks in our math department they have SEI endorsement. Some have gone through and received master's degrees in this as well. So we're structuring our classes to kind of best meet the needs with the needs of the staff that we have, or the strengths of the staff that we have.
Are we seeing students speaking languages other than Spanish and Portuguese?
Yes, but not at a significant percentage.
So I'm just curious about the translation. We are hiring all these in-house translators. They're going to, I presume, be Spanish and Portuguese speaking.
They are. Mhm.
So what do we do with when we have to translate in other
We
languages?
service it out for the higher cost, unfortunately.
Because there's a lower
A
incidence.
much lower incidence, yes. Yeah.
And then the other question I have is, I presume not the slave kids, but do we get kids that come in, they don't speak English, but they might have math skills, right?
Sure.
Depends on what tier, right?
Right. I mean, well,
Stu-
no, because they could be first level English students.
Right.
But they could have learned math in their
Native language.
native language. So what do we do with them? Because I presume that the math that we're instructing, well, you said algebra and geometry. So do we get kids that could maybe take pre-calc or higher that don't speak
Typically,
English?
we haven't seen that a lot.
We probably want them to master the algebra.
Well,
so-
we go through as part of the intake process, and Lynn can speak more to the intake piece, but I also know that there are 2 assessments that in terms of English readiness, but there's also a math readiness piece, an assessment that's done that way. So it's generated by the math department as a means of giving students some access to this. It's more numeracy-driven than it is literacy-driven.
Well, that's it. The higher you get
Correct.
in math, the more numbers there are and less words.
So that's
numbers
another
are
means
universal.
of looking at students and their performance to figure out what placement we put them most in. I mean, other pieces we've done, we've changed some of our courses and added another layer to kind of add supports for students. We're seeing more students who are coming in at lower levels of math than higher levels.
Thank you.
How about open positions, Mike? Is that a good idea to
Sure.
run down those?
That's great.
Okay.
I just ran that right before the meeting. Right now, the majority of the open positions are behavior techs. We have 3 open in ECC, which we knew we were going to have open because we're having students who are transitioning in from early intervention. So those, while they're open right now, we've created them anticipating when these students come up, then we're going to fill those positions as they actually come in. We have 1 behavior tech at Jarwick, but I believe Principal Sanborn has a candidate for it. We're working through that process. 1 behavior tech at Whitcomb. We have a night head custodian at the high school. We have a weekend custodian position in Whitcomb that is filled. It's just showing as vacant right now, but we do have a candidate who's gone through the process. We currently have 2 special education teachers at Whitcomb. We have long-term subs in those roles. Long-term subs don't show up on our position control because they're not going to be permanent employees. We also have an EL teacher at Jarwick, which I believe is filled. I think there was a candidate name that I saw. So we don't have that many open positions right now across the
I
district.
just signed that one today.
Oh, and
Head
Maureen just
custodian.
signed that one today.
Head custodian, off the list. Okay.
The
So
custodian.
that'll
for
open up a regular
The
night custodian.
night one?
The night or the,
The head night
The
at the
head
high school,
night at the high school. Yes.
which will
Okay.
then open up a back position, a night position at the high school.
thank you.
Can I ask a question about the capital request? And Mr. Mayor, many of these things, I believe, also fall under the city. So I know Mr. Gloney in the past, when he was just facilities, had his master list. Do these fall under his master list? Do any of them fall under his master list?
Now he has a master list for everything in the city. so
Yes, I
he's-
know,
No,
so-
I mean, every project in the city, every problem in the city, every issue in the city.
His
is
yellow
now
pad has
his.
gotten really
Yeah.
big, I know.
So-
But, so I assume these are somewhere on there as well, and the priorities are a give and take of whatever the city is going to say. We've had this conversation every single year, so.
I mean, I have some tremendous amount of money in there for security this year,
Right.
the alarm systems.
Right.
Cameras.
So
Cameras.
The cameras.
Video equipment.
No, and I mean, I know in the past,
Yeah.
I know he's very good about finding grants and things like that. Like I saw the LED, the conversion to LEDs, and I know a lot of municipalities receive grants for those kind of things. So I assume that those are
And that's
things.
the money we've been using for it, to be honest.
Right, is that, okay, it's good that we have a list of things. That goes to the other list of things.
Okay, can I ask another?
Please.
Sorry. So how is our situation at ECC as far as growing? And what about, our space needs again? And what about bilingual opportunities?
Hi.
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 We added the other full-day class this year. It is right by the superintendent's office on the
I
second
love
floor.
it. I read there the other day. I read The Cat in the Hat.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
So we've had success with that. Again, as you guys know, in this building, we, like everybody else, we're utilizing all the space that we have. So this year for growth, there really isn't any opportunity right now. As far as a need, if we had more space, I most likely would be filling it. I have no doubt about that. From the special ed side, we're still running into students qualifying. So had Mike mentioned the 3 behavior tech positions we had open, we had students move in unexpectedly even since then, which there's not a whole lot we can do about that. But we're at as big a capacity in our sub-separate program as we've been in pretty much the years that I've been here. So it's growing, but it's similar to everybody else in the other buildings. It's, space issues. So with the opportunity for a new school coming up, that's an opportunity, I think, for growth for this program.
Do you maintain like a wait list situation?
Yeah, we
And
have a wait list.
What kind of numbers are we talking about that would be sitting on that wait list?
We just had our community screening in January for registration for next year. And we try to get all that information to parents as soon as we can if they got in through the lottery and everything like that, because if they don't get in our program, they try to find other programs in the community.
Right.
So right now, the wait list is probably at 40-ish from just that screening alone, which doesn't entail every call we get since then. We've probably had more calls and we just put them on the list after that. And we're looking at having an opportunity for another screening in the spring later on, just to see where we would be at with that, to kind of have a better number of how the program would grow in the future. So, you know, right now there's 40 from the screening that we had in January, and we've had about maybe 10 more added from calls from that, so that's at about 50 on the wait list. And I'm sure if we had another open screening, we'd have a lot more people. And as far as the EL question, Lynn and I have talked often about that. Right now, we don't have an opportunity to grow that, but it's something that's definitely on our agenda and radar for the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Did you want to talk about the attendance
Sure.
officer?
Sure.
Is that what you meant?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
sounds
Just
like-
one more point on, you know, we keep talking about enrollment. I just want to be clear that our last year's enrollment, our projections, we're down 5 students in the elementary schools from our projections last year. So we know where we were, we know where we are. This isn't anything new or, you know, anything exciting, but this, compare it exactly to where we were last year, we're down 5 students from our projections.
The only question, and I'd have to go back to it, is it appears, and I'm just going by memory,
Yep.
that some of our class sizes, though, in our elementaries have really blossomed specifically at Jarrick, where I'd have to go back and look at everything, which I did bring last year's.
Jarrick's up 17 students from
Right.
what we projected.
Right, and that's the only concern I would say that was really popping out, seeming like they got, you know, they got hit hard, you know, which has really impacted greatly, so.
Catherine, you had asked about the attendance officer. I'm wondering, is that in relation to the increase of the .5 to the 1.0?
Yeah, I just was
and
curious.
what his role is?
Well, and I know that when we were talking about it, it was a lot of the follow-up on making sure
Correct.
we're really following up on the
Correct.
residency issues and a lot of the court needs and things like that. And, you know, just curious as to where that's standing and how is that moving forward.
Toby's ready.
Toby, have
Toby
fun.
is ready. Toby works quite closely
We're ready.
with
So,
Steve. Thank you, Toby.
It'd be nice to look at year-to-year data percentages to fully look at the impact for this. So at the end of the year, we could take a look at 2015 and 2016 and really look at the impact. But I can speak to immediate impact of Mr. Marchiarelli's position. I mean, there's been an increase in face-to-face meetings with families, going into homes, creating a bridge for students to get back, creating that relationship, and then engaging families. He's been successful. He meets with regularly with principals and folks at all levels to identify the students that are most at risk and works to re-engage them with the adjustment counselors and with my colleagues behind me. Speaking just to Hildreth, he's re-engaged 7 students that have been unable to reach, those 7 students who are on the verge of dropping out. So that's a huge impact alone. When students re-engage, MCAS scores increase, dropout rates decrease, graduation rates increase. There's an increased engagement with families, which is a district goal. It's a win for schools in the community. Obviously, when kids are in school, they're off the streets, they're not at home, and they're in progressing, which is what we like to see. His position's high impact at a low cost for the district. I think I speak confidently for my colleagues behind me and folks at the table. It's an important position for this year, for next year, and for years to come.
And Toby was really the one who advocated. He went to was it a seminar?
Attendance summit.
Attendance summit, and came back with data that we looked at as a team, and we were astounded by the number of attendance officers in some districts that were comparable, and we were able to fund that to a 1.0 FTE, and I appreciate that data. That really shows, you know, the need is going to continue, I think.
I think so. It's not a Marlborough issue, it's a state issue.
Oh, yeah.
Which goes without saying.
Which I think we, you know, when we initially had that
policy,
conversation about, you know,
yeah.
well, right, and we just adjusted that attendance policy. Now, obviously, that's not where he's making the direct impact on that. But there is, the hope that by creating a policy that's district-wide, that we're kind of training everyone up front about what the expectations are so that we don't necessarily have to get to that, that path. But I guess that's where I'm trying to make sure that are we giving enough support services behind overall attendance so that, the assistant principals at each of the buildings are able to handle what's going on there, funnel it up correctly, so that we aren't ending up having to send more people in your direction as opposed to trying to catch folks before we have to go down that path.
Certainly a great step in the right direction.
Right, and re-engaging, I mean, that's wonderful, 7 re-engaged students, not only intrinsically for those students specifically and their growth and development, or college and career readiness, but when you re-engage them, as Toby said, they do well on the tests, they help our accountability, they don't drop out, they graduate, they find, successful pathway to career or to college. It's so gratifying to see them walk across the stage, and we will, if ESSA remains on the table, who knows what will happen, that is one of the targets that they'll be looking at is chronic absenteeism. So it cuts across a lot of the metrics. It's just so important. So I'm really happy that we were able to make him a 1.0.
Yeah, that's great data to hear that you've been able to get that re-engagement with that many students. That's huge.
It's going to affect your whole community.
Of course.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Of course.
When students aren't there.
Right.
Absolutely.
It affects everybody.
Absolutely.
It's obvious. I have a question of how Steve is working in the younger grades. I recently heard anecdotal information from a student at Whitcomb, a teacher at Whitcomb, who said that she's got students in her classes that are absent every other day. Like, how is that possible? You probably don't know. I don't know if you know the answer.
I think I think the attendance issue is spread across all
It
levels,
is.
and I think the
It is.
1.0 is gradually helping us hit the high needs kids, or the
Right.
students that have super, super high attendance levels. But I think it's a problem that we need to watch and look at potentially increasing attendance levels
Right.
down the line if
Yeah.
this trend continues.
And that episodic absenteeism is really difficult to pinpoint, where they're in for 2 days, out a day. That's just so detrimental too, but what can we do? Why? What's the reason?
Exactly, and being able to provide wraparound services.
Sure.
We know there's
Sure.
lots of reasons why kids aren't in school.
We do.
And
Yep.
it's not just playing hooky.
No.
But, so we need to, be able to support those families because there's other stuff going on.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
And you don't often know what those things are unless you get in there and
Absolutely.
actually see it.
Absolutely.
So I'm just curious, at the summit that you went to, comparable schools, how many attendance officers do some of them have?
Somerville had, I want to say, 8.
Somerville probably has
8,
7 or
Toby?
8, I bet.
7 or 8.
Hold on.
Cambridge.
Somerville has 8.
Somerville's wonderful.
Cambridge has 9.
9.
Milford doesn't have any yet. Framingham has 1. So it's, as you just said, the attendance issues span from Andy's level all the way up. I mean, it's a big problem.
It is.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it's a national problem.
Absolutely.
It's not just us, but.
But it's our problem right now.
Absolutely.
We want to fix it.
Yep.
Thank you, Toby.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Toby. Substitutions.
I was just going to say that. Substitutes across the
I must have been thinking.
Going down your list.
Yeah, I was looking down my list too.
Right. I knew it was on your mind because it came up at our last, when Mr. Daniels
committee
was reporting out to you about the program. Substitutes, and your question was, substitutes across the district, how can we better fund? What is the rate per day? You had 85 per
Well,
day?
because
or-
when we had the discussion at our last school committee meeting, I think Mr. Daniels brought up that was a concern about making sure that we had enough substitutes, and that there was some concern about the rate, and were we able to get enough people in
a pool.
So my question is, what are we dealing with here? Because we need to make sure we have, staff, whether it be staff, or substitutes in front of our students. And how are we going to handle this? Because I don't see a line item in here talking about money towards substitutes. And if we're talking that we have a monetary amount where we've got to look at an increase to make sure we're having people here, somewhere there has to be some money. So, to address it, I just want to understand the where, when, how you guys are trying to do it, because if that's an issue, we have to address it somehow, because having no one or having a para have to step in there is not our solution.
It's not
It
the
cannot be
solution.
the solution.
It's not the solution.
Right.
Mr. Bergeron?
So I have some thoughts on this.
Good.
Part of the issue, the cost. We budget close to $500,000 for substitutes. And the past 2 years, we haven't hit that $500,000 mark. We've been a little bit below that, about $460 one year and $455 another year. So we have a little bit of room within the existing budget, the way it trends, to be able to make those kinds of decisions, like going from 80 to 85. That's one piece of it. I think that doesn't solve the problem.
80 to 85 a day,
Yeah.
dollars.
And I
Not
think
long-term sub, just daily rate.
Just the daily.
just the daily
rates.
sub.
Right.
And I think that's one piece of it. I think the second piece of it is the supply right now. We are facing some significant issues filling certain types of positions. And this is one of them. Filling substitute positions when the Massachusetts economy is steamrolling at only 2% unemployment is problematic. It is actually really tough, because we're competing not for substitute employment. Those folks are able to gain full-time employment across the Commonwealth and get a better level of benefits. So that's another thing that is in the back of our minds. And the third is, I think at some point we need to look at incentivizing substitutes to want to work in Marlborough beyond just the $85. What else could we possibly offer them? I have talked to Heidi. We've started to talk about this because I wanted to bring it to the negotiations subcommittee.
Yeah.
So I think that's where you start with it.
Yeah.
And I think we need to look. I'm not just at teacher subs, because we also pay very low for para subs, behavior tech subs, clerical. We're at minimum wage. So there's some things that I think we can look at for the whole and build towards the future. Even if we raise it from 80 to 85, I don't think we're going to see a huge amount of.
Well, then it needs to go hand in hand with Patty, from an HR standpoint, is how are we reaching out to secure the right people? Because just putting a dollar amount is not necessarily going to do it.
Right, and I think we can look at different models to be able to incentivize people to want to work here and spend more days in Marlborough. I think that's part of the key.
Sliding scale.
Because when we are looking at this pool of employment, they have many different options. They could very easily, in this region, sub for many different school districts and get the similar level of pay. So really, it's a choice for them. We want them to choose Marlborough. How are we going to get them to do that? That, I think, is the bigger question.
Yeah.
So I have some ideas. I'll share with we'll go to negotiations, but I think we can create an incentive system that doesn't necessarily break the bank or increase our budgets, but creates a better pool of people to do that.
I'd actually like to have that problem, meaning that we have so many candidates who want to be substitutes
Right.
because of the program that we pick
Right.
or come up with.
Yep.
So. But you're right. I don't know if we're going to get there just yet.
That's why I didn't ask for any money, because we
Yeah.
still have about $50,000
Which
within the budget.
that's great, and I'm sure you're bringing more of a smile to him when I'm asking about the money. I just want to make sure we are figuring out a way of addressing it.
Right.
I don't want to have this same conversation next year being brought up, that for some reason we're still having the same issue, because it's not just the money. It's, as you said, potentially incentivizing. I can't, whatever. Get to it.
Right.
Working with Patty from an HR standpoint, how are we reaching out to surrounding communities? What can we be doing to make it more attractive to be here? Because unfortunately, some of our solutions that have had to be are not solutions that we can withstand to have anymore.
We have a short-term solution. Patty and I are presenting to the about-to-graduate students at Framingham State in a few weeks. Now, that's a short-term solution, but
But it's something.
they leave so early They graduate so early, and then typically they're in the job search or whatever they're doing, waiting to, get their license and everything squared away. We're happy to take that crew, so we'll make a plea and bring some business cards when we go and make some contacts with folks and jazz them up about Marlborough, because we're open for another month and a half. So that's something, but it's not, to your point, it's not a long-term fix.
No, but I think it's, part of it is having the discussion, putting it out on the table, knowing that we have to revisit it again and again and again, so we find a solution as opposed to, yeah, we'll take care of it.
Right,
And not that you would, but I mean, I think that it's kind of our own due diligence that we have to stay on top of it.
And a lot of times, I was speaking to Wendy Stanley today about this issue. The more field interns we have in the buildings, the more you build up that relationship, and maybe they don't get a job for that first year out, and they've built up such a good relationship that we take them on as a long-term sub or a building sub or even a per diem. So the relationships are important, the word gets out, this is a nice place to work. We need to beat that drum.
So the concept of the building sub, like you just said, I mean, we used to have that model.
Right? We still have those.
We have
do.
building subs?
We do.
We do have,
every
they're
day,
not
and-
paid as
Can't do every
long-term
day.
sub. We can't do every day because then they would be eligible for benefits.
Like
Under
Every
the city.
18 days,
So
every
every
18.
days, take a day off.
Every 18.
So that it keeps it as a
Fresh.
not secure employment, so.
And we don't have enough, like, I'm still concerned about pulling paras for an hour, even if it's an hour here or 2 hours there to cover
Still a problem.
meetings.
You're absolutely right.
There's,
Yeah.
we need
Happens. Yep.
35 teachers are absent.
Mr. Daniels told us last time,
Yeah.
on average.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot of teachers.
It's a lot.
Can't fill it. Just do it.
Looking through.
Can't do it here.
We voted a special, but
No,
city
won't be
council,
allowed.
but apparently that's.
Don't go there.
Yeah, I know. She subs in 2 different districts because no.
But you can't sub in our district.
She'd need the special
If the
thing.
city council will grant them.
If the city council will. Special
dun.
dispensation.
Mr. Fidget, Mayor Fidget would like to substitute.
Mrs. Matthews, you had a question about regarding hiring the best candidates and retention of such, and thoughts about changing the mentoring program,
Yeah, which we had.
first and second year.
Yeah.
Would you like, we did prepare some thoughts about this. We've talked about this for a while in our meetings.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while. We know that over the last couple of years, we have designed the new teacher course as the second year. But throughout this year's in the new teacher course, there's been a lot of topics that have come up that in the discussion about, isn't this some of the things that wished we knew last year? So I started to talk to superintendent about adding additional meetings next year for the first-year teachers, just for them, not with their mentors, so it's just designed for the new teachers on a monthly basis, that we would do learning targets and success criteria was a perfect example. We do that during the new teacher class. It should be something that we do with all of our new teachers. A lot of 1 hour seminar on Aspen. Right at the beginning. We do an overview of it quickly in our staff orientation, but really giving them the extra one-on-one. And now just the other perfect example is that we spend a lot of time in our mentoring mentors in our new teacher class talking about the evaluation
I was just gonna
process
say that.
and how to log into the Teach Point system and
Yep.
attach the evidence and everything. And quite often they'll stay afterwards and we'll sit and we'll do it. That's something that should be provided to first-year teachers. It takes stress off of them. So we're going to be adding some of those things to it.
Great, no, that's great.
Mary, on that though, I mean, isn't there a way to set up a continual mentoring program so that you're paired with someone and then the next person's paired with someone, next person's paired with someone, so there's already something in place that's not just necessarily your grade level is meeting or your specialty content area, but that you have someone who's kind of your automatic go-to?
You mean beyond the second year of the
Yeah.
formal
Mhm.
mentoring
Yeah.
and induction program?
I mean, like, in any businesses I've ever been involved in, you had someone who was kind of like assigned as like your go-to. So I knew I would have someone that, you know, was my peer, but still my
So
my
beyond
go-to.
the second year, there really is no provision for that. It's the first 2 years, yet there are informal mentorships and relationships that continue, you know, with that mentor. But if, you know, through your PLCs, you develop the relationships, through your departments, your teacher leaders and your lead teachers at the middle and the high school level really are meant to serve that function, as well as the K-12 coordinators, and the relationships sort of form naturally, but beyond the second year, we don't have a formal system.
No, and the formal identification of a staff member to support a new staff member is only available and is negotiated and is part of the contract
In the
in the
they get a
first
stipend.
year.
First year. Yeah.
Right, and it's first year as a teacher, not first year in Marlborough. So even if you're first year in Marlborough, you sort of left to, well, you are and you're not. I
Well,
mean,
right.
there are colleagues, there are situational leaders all throughout our schools that rise to the occasion and become their buddies, their peers.
We
So
just
there's-
do it all the time, but only official mentors get paid for it.
Correct. But I think it goes back to when we had the workshop and the conversation there about the past 2 years, that, you know, that third year and subsequent years, where not only is it nice to have a peer, but somebody who is not in the same subject area that you can,
Yeah,
you know,
bounce
best
things off.
practices. And also not necessarily an evaluator or a supervisor, but somebody who, you know, as you said, you can bounce things off of. You know, just to be able to say, I'm having an issue with this, how have you dealt with it in the past?
Right, and there's always that evaluator relationship, and we had the meeting today, the joint evaluation. You know, we're hoping that those relationships blossom and flower too. It just because they evaluate you doesn't mean you can't. Those
ask a
relationships
question,
can
of
be
course,
rich and
right.
vibrant as well.
But I think going back to my question of hiring good candidates and retention, you know, after 2 years, you don't want to just say, oh, you're on your own, bye.
No. No.
And so that's what I'm saying.
That's a good
is that-
point.
that you-
No.
How do we, you know, yes, PLCs exist, and it just, how do we make it a culture that it's
That's the
right
word.
there?
That's the word. Yep. Thank you for that. Next.
Looking down my list. Oh, about when we were talking about some of the different positions at our last school committee meeting. And we had some conversation around some of the coordinator positions. I know we obviously need to talk about heading into negotiations on some of those other positions before we can really head down that path. But I think we had spoken a little bit about looking at the numbers across the district, about what's our percentages of students from a special education need, an EL need, or a general population need. Just number of students we're servicing. I'm trying to understand, obviously with special education, we have a certain amount that needs to be provided specifically because of regulations, right?
17.7%, but there's various needs in those 17%, right, Heather? It's across the board in terms of need level, but the percentage is 17.7%, and upwards of 21% of the EL population now. Am I right with that, Lynn?
And then, okay. 21%, 17%. I just want to look back then on the number of employees that have that impact towards that percentage of students, which I can go back and do, but I'd like to circle back with you guys if I can on that number to understand our staffing to support those groups.
Teachers or administrators, the
Overall.
whole?
Overall.
Okay.
not only, not just staff, but then we're talking about from the evaluation standpoint. So what's directly having that impact and stemming back to? Because I think it was, and I don't have the org chart in front of me, so I don't want to call them the wrong positions. Teacher leader, teacher.
Well, the
Team-
former team chairs.
Former team chairs. So those were all special education, and then feeding up into those other positions. So that's what I'd like to understand is how many those numbers are.
And I think that's I believe we have a date, Mrs. Matthews, don't we, to
For
begin
negotiation.
negotiations with Unit A?
Yes.
I want to say soon, next week. We do? We do, said Mr. Walter.
Please keep me in the loop.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You should be part of the loop. I should have asked you first.
It's all right.
It's all right?
I'll still bring the donuts.
You'll
Is
still
that-
bring the donuts.
Is that also for discussion of the dual certification?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a
Yes,
wellness
impact,
conversation
wellness,
and high school schedule. Right. There are many things. We're charting the course. I'm not sure we'll
You didn't say.
finish everything done. Everything.
Is that a book?
We're laying the plan to get it.
Yeah.
What's the priority?
Playing the plan.
Hmm?
No, we have to discuss all of those things.
Yes.
You good with the question? Yeah, I'm fine with the question.
I just want to sort of zoom back up, if I could, to the 30,000-foot level. Understandable, given our numbers and our demographics, with respect to EL students. We have roughly 20% EL, but of course, conversely, that means we have 80% non-EL. And when I see, at least as it pertains to new staffing requests, approximately 90%, 9 out of 11.2 positions going to 20% of our student population, it made me wonder, can you inform us as to some non-EL requests that could not be included in the budget, that had to fall by the wayside, just so that we can perhaps mull those over and make sure we're doing our due diligence and make sure that
Great question.
we are considering fairly all requests? I'm not asking for an exhaustive list, but perhaps the most significant non-EL requests that you and your brain trust and your
Sure.
wisdom decided had to be culled from the request list.
Absolutely. I'll pick wraparound coordinator at the elementary level.
Can you repeat
District-wide
that?
wraparound coordinator at the elementary level. Does anyone want to address why we, Heather?
Wraparound coordinator?
The conversation was
Support
around,
services.
currently, we're using Family Success Partnerships out of Aspen Valley Collaborative, and they've been providing a significant amount of support. And at this time, when we were having the conversations, we still weren't using all the, per se, seats or family seats that we have with FSP. So at that time, it was determined we needed to look into what that position would look like more, look what would it entail and the impact on the district, and if it was the right position for the district at this time. It's still out there for conversation. There's some research that Mike and I discussed that we wanted to do around that role, but currently, right now, FSP is providing us with the support that position was going to provide us.
And I believe we have 65 seats designated for Marlborough, and we're only using about half of them right now.
At that time, I'm
it's
not sure what it
increased.
is right now.
And while we have Heather, I believe there were some occupational OT, SLPs, a split, 0.5 at one of the elementaries in the ECC. Did you want to talk about the audit and?
We're working right now recalibrating our departments, and that's something we've been putting a lot of effort in since the beginning of the year. Mike and I have also had a lot of conversations in comparing our needs, our SLP student-to-staff ratio compared to other districts, and we are, how do you want to put it, we have more SLPs. Our rate of having related service providers is significantly higher than other districts in the state.
We have
So
a
we
lower
need to
student
look-
ratio.
So we need to really look at recalibrating to ensure that before we move forward and increasing the numbers we currently have, that we are balanced with the ones that we have at this time.
You may.
And I might have the numbers wrong, but thinking of what was said earlier, as a district, we've grown 33 students this year? Is that correct?
31.
31. In EL, 155. So that might explain the need of staff, that the growth has been disproportional.
Oh,
and
no,
therefore the need.
certainly, but I want to make sure that
Yes, you have a good question.
we as a committee are vetting all of the
Right,
requests to the
right.
extent, and then if there is something that we feel really needs to be placed back in the form. No, I can certainly understand why, the focus on EL. But I am concerned, there are 80% of our student population is non-EL, and we need to make sure they're getting our due attention and our due diligence as well.
Mr. Cleary had also requested we're going to call it business and art, but they were really kind of fills for semester courses, Charlie, and we put them in as that. And we looked at numbers at the high school and other semester offerings and class sizes and so on, and those, at this point, did not get funded. I'll say at this point. That was just about it, wasn't it?
There were a couple other smaller positions, testing coordinator, but some of the smaller positions, we feel like we need to look at our existing resources first, and then see what we can do within budget, because even though this year, within FY17's budget, we have been able to add quite a few things with the amount of turnover savings we've had. So for example, like Toby was just talking about, we were able to move the attendance officer from a 0.5 to 1.0. We were able to increase, I'm sorry, we weren't able to increase. We were able to add back the EL coordinator at the elementary level. We were able to create a 1.0 FTE position for the high school for the athletics department for the trainer. That used to be a stipend position. We were able to turn that into a full-time position. We were able to re-look at some of our administrative positions in human resources and communications. So we have been able to do quite a bit within the existing budget, including adding some of the behavior techs we needed from ECC. So as we go into next year's budget, we're going to do the same thing. We're always trying to see what turnover savings can we have, what can we add without creating, operational deficits in the future, and without creating too much of a burden on the next year's budget. That's always kind of the key, because we could have taken all those savings this year, eat them up onto a lot of FTEs, but then the budget in front of you would have been over 5%, because the way that the salaries grow.
Don't want to do that.
And that's not really what we wanted to do.
In addition, a Chromebook technician, I'm just going to add that one in, that certainly services, a wide variety of kids in the district, and that was an important addition. He's worked out really nicely.
Can I ask a couple more, if I might? Clarity, the athletic fee, which we had, removed, if you will, from having last year, it's still going to be within the operational budget, so we are keeping that at a 0?
Absolutely.
Correct? Okay, DC trip, there had been an allotment, if you will. I just want to make sure, are we still looking to approach it that way, that there will be an allotment that's being removed, if you will, from the social studies budget that will help to support that continuing?
The social studies budget will still have, I believe, $10 per pupil,
Right.
Which for Whitcomb will end up be about $13,000. So if they wish to spend social studies money in that way, it's certainly going to be available. But I can't, I don't know exactly how it's going to work next year. What we've been trying to do is year by year, look at the program and determine how much support we can give it. This year, we've been able to give it lots of support. Next year, I can't tell you what's going to happen in September or October that might require us to look at things differently. So I don't want to give a yes, that's absolutely the way we're going to do it in the future, because it's depending upon what our resources are available.
Because you don't have a magic 8 ball, I get it.
Not yet.
Is it our hope to continue in the direction of being able to support that program so that that continues?
Absolutely, and I think it's our intent to reduce the amount of fees on parents in the district across all levels. So I think that's part of our...
So maybe if we come up with a fundraising policy, that we could potentially go down that route of actually having fundraising, that might be able to help better.
And I would like to add to the mix that, directed towards you and MEDC perhaps, with new companies coming in, there's always opportunities for companies to want to partner with us, and I would love to see maybe one of them step up and underwrite the Washington trip for us. So families wouldn't have to be struggling or not going. A lot of the kids don't go. And it may be the one opportunity that they have to do something like this.
We actually had a board meeting yesterday morning, and the schools came up, and many of the board members were looking to participate more in the schools. I talked to the superintendent today about it, and we're going to open up those lines of communication. We tried a couple of years ago, and it didn't work as well as expected, but I think, everyone's poised to do more next year.
That would be
Coming
fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, opening those communications with a concrete plan, like,
Right.
this is what
That's
we
what
need
they're
you to
looking
do.
for.
Yeah.
As
Tell us
opposed to,
exactly what you
yes.
want.
Yeah, tell us what you want, this is what we want. We want X number of dollars to underwrite that trip.
Which
so
would be
every
great.
student can go.
Which would be great, then, that's, I guess, why I'm asking the question, though, is if we can then have the data of really understanding
How much.
what kind of money
Yeah.
needed to be earmarked, so we can actually go forward and present whomever with a concrete plan of this is what would help to get the whole 8th grade class to have this experience, because in many cases, there is a good amount of population that may never get to DC. So it'd be, that would be
it's a
great.
good plan.
That'd be fantastic.
Maybe they would chaperone, too.
Fantastic. Another question that's more reaching back towards some of our history was library services. How's that being handled? What are we doing now? How are we making sure that
At the elementary level.
at the
I'm assuming.
elementary
I'm assuming, not at the middle and high.
specifically? Well, I'm hoping that, it'd be really nice to understand how are we handling it now?
Mrs.
Anyone?
Murphy? Yeah, we just had this conversation at Jarrick the other day. Maybe does Mr. Sanborn want to address
Yeah,
this?
that would be
We haven't
good.
heard from you, Mr. Sanborn.
Exhausted long enough. Evening. So, speaking specifically about Jarrick, the library, from my understanding prior to me coming here, there was a library at the elementary levels, and now we have a literacy support person in the libraries that are extending the learning within the standards and the frameworks in and around literacy and writing, kindergarten through grade 4, which I can say is a block of time for which children are excited about and thoroughly enjoy. We, however, require a lot of support from parent volunteers to assist us with circulation of books, checking out. It does still exist, so it has not been dissolved. However, it is on a every other week basis as opposed to every time you come to the library, which, in my opinion, isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it may give further opportunity for the book to actually be read at home.
Okay.
Myself, as a parent, 2 weeks isn't, we could fit in a book every 2 weeks from the library in addition to everything else that we do. And they still get the flavor of doing that from kindergarten all the way up. We have kindergarten paras who are in the kindergarten classrooms where the most concentrated need of support is essential to assist with that. As a concrete example, I was just doing an observation of our literacy person of the Literacy Center with a kindergarten class where the children were rotating through stations at 2:20 to 2:40 in the afternoon with great success at the age of 5 and 6. There was learning targets, success criteria with the overall mission that when you hear the first ding on the chime, you stop and you start to reassemble the materials back for the next group. And when you heard two dings on the chime, that was when you rotate. Again, I will say 5 and 6-year-old children, 2:20 to 2:40. That is amazing. It is amazing. So I think we still can support our libraries in the way that we have, in my opinion, the way that we've been doing things. And from my historical perspective, having worked in several other districts prior to coming to Marlborough, it is an immense luxury to have someone to perform and to work with the students that we do have here in Marlborough. I've been in many districts where there is no librarian period at the elementary level, that if it, at all, it is open on certain days before or after school, or everything is being done by volunteers. We have the luxury of every elementary school has a slew of parents that come in and want to support. And that is really an area where most parents can feel the most comfortable, where they're not responsible for teaching a child how to read in their perspective, or teaching them the new math because they're unsure of doing it or undoing something with the child. So shelving books, taking books from the book hospital and rebinding them and putting different stickers on them and putting them in areas and making them more accessible to students is something that is really happening quite well, in my opinion. So I think that we're doing a nice job with what we have. Our literacy folks are consulting with the librarians within the district to make sure that they're making appropriate book selections. They're talking to teachers. They're talking with the PTO. And I think we have a really good handle on it. It is really an exciting time. Kids do enjoy it, and I would invite anybody to come down and see it. It really is. It really is a great opportunity.
Ron, is this being emulated as well at Kane and Richer, or how is it handled? Differently, similarly?
Same.
Just trying to make sure.
We have the same
parity.
positions. I will speak for my colleagues. We do have the same positions. We all have parent volunteers.
Yep.
So I would venture to say, with great assurance, that it is very similar in the three elementary schools. Yes?
Right.
Minus the chime at Richer. Put that in the notes.
So we'll get you one. I may have
Can
a
you add
toy
that
in a
to the
closet
list?
at home.
Instructional materials.
Yeah, can we budget a chime in?
Instructional materials.
$10. Ting.
We had a crosswalk the other day with Principal Cleary, and Heather and Mary and I went to walk with Ron and Calliope at Jarrick, and that was one of the areas we looked at because I had a ton of questions, and wow, it was great. So, sorry to put you on the spot.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And class sizes, we had talked about high school. How are we doing? You mentioned the one situation, are we still doing some of the combined classrooms where we're having some
Multiple
classroom
levels.
setting? Yeah, multiple levels within, like we're addressing some of the
Mr. Duplessis?
CP. Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Duplessis.
But he's,
It's like a shop.
the way he
It's like a
operates.
shop, yes. It's real world.
Since you were standing
about
up, I thought I'd bring you
peer-to-peer.
back in here, so.
He was stretching.
I was stretching.
I know.
But that's okay.
I understand.
Chairs are a little uncomfortable. Yes, we're still doing multi-level classes in one classroom. It's happening Mr. Duplessis is one example, engineering. Another is video production.
Chinese.
Essentially, all of our languages are mixed levels.
Yeah.
And then, so beyond those three, we have about 15 or 16 more. Mostly electives, and kind of combining courses that may not have run by themselves. And then we found ways to kind of teach them within the same setting.
Which is good to hear, I would say, because I think in some cases, we've had conversations in the past where we still wanted to offer something, but yet there may only be 5 students.
Right.
You're kind of concerned, you
Right.
know, you want to,
We try to find ways.
yeah.
Video
It doesn't
production, too.
always-
Is video production
Yes.
another spot where there's a lot of, clarifier,
The three major
though.
ones are video production, the engineering courses, and the language
For
courses.
entrepreneurship, I think she does.
I think she
both
might.
honors
She
and
does.
CP.
This year, we started the year that way, and then we started the planning process that way, and then we actually broke it because the numbers broke
Were higher.
evenly. And then when we moved into second semester, we had to combine others. So we tend to be as flexible as we can by moving things around to make sure that kids can get whatever they can get into.
And with some of that, where we're finding, say, with the TV prod or whatever, where we're finding that a lot of students are interested in that, are we, to your point of creating additional semester courses, are we looking at ways that we can then increase additional opportunities, say, in TV prod or something, to give them multiple semesters, changing it up?
The way that it's structured is currently Video Production 1 runs on its own, so the introductory course. Then 2, 3, 4, and 5 run collectively together, and the focus is different in each one. 5 is more based on students who really have a proclivity for video production and want to pursue other opportunities. So with the partnership that we've forged with the Cable Trust and Dan Gwindon, there's been a lot of different conversation about finding ways to put students in not quite internship pieces, but opportunities that are beyond necessarily the school.
Right.
We're still working on that, so
Yeah,
I don't want to
which-
say that we're there. We're not there.
Yeah, which
but
is great though, because it kind
we're
of
starting.
speaks to, like Hudson does a fantastic job of actually having like a ton of their sports and music events all taped and live. What a great opportunity it would be for our own students to constantly be doing that. They've got.
We do, yeah, we
They
do.
do. They do.
And they bring
Yes.
it down to WMCT, and they produce it for us.
Right,
Yes.
and I was just gonna say, if we could
Yeah.
continue to increase that opportunity, because it would give us more visibility from our school districts.
And I think we have a, Katrina Lambert is hosting High School Beat.
Yep.
I think that just started up in conjunction with Dan and WMCT, which is what
great.
we've been hoping for.
Fantastic.
Authentic, real-world application. Right.
Exactly. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
I think I've had my questions answered.
But give her a minute.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any other committee members have any questions?
Move to approve.
Move to approve?
Motion made and seconded to approve. Any further discussion?
Further discussion.
Shall we put a little
Take that
Zoom?
book out, I'm gonna start cutting.
Okay.
I'm telling you right now.
What book?
Any further discussion?
You've got to move it along. If you don't have any other questions, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I didn't know that we were approving it tonight. I thought we were
14th.
waiting for
Oh,
moving it to the
that's true.
meeting.
We do move.
So that we could,
Okay, I would send my, move to adjourn. What do you want me to move to? He's looking at me.
not that there's
Move to
anything
have a
wrong,
coffee break.
I was kind of thinking we were going to have some time to consider and think through, as
You're right.
opposed we were supposed to
Scheduled March 14th.
moving it forward awfully quickly, Michelle.
There's an agenda item on the 14th.
Thank you. That would be a great movement, is moving it to an agenda item on the
Can I
next meeting.
entertain a motion to table until March 14th?
Sorry, I was like, well, what?
Motion to table till March 14th.
Motion made and seconded to table until March 14th. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries.
Move to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.